Hey, welcome to another event organized by the Freethinker Institute. This week's event is not really a lecture, but more like a large group discussion. The title of the event, Traditional Socrates Café, refers to a practice of gathering people from all backgrounds to discuss philosophy. This time, the conversation revolved around the question, how can we find truth? Facilitating the discussion is our own Garrett Lang.
A quick intro. We want to create like a warm, open-minded community that helps people, create transformational personal and professional growth, where we can all be the best version of ourselves and where we kind of help each other to do that. And really to create a world where everybody prospers and is successful, to increase happiness and decrease harm in the world. So that's kind of the goal of the community. I'm going to post the online community, which we do through Discord. It's free software, which lets us sort of write back and forth with each other, throughout the week. And so for anyone that wants to stay engaged with the community throughout the week, I just posted the link as well as the URL for the website. And then I'm going to create a Socrates Cafe. So we can actually, if we want, this is an old one, but why don't we just do a new one here? I'm going to put a link in the chat for topics. And so the way that Socrates Cafe works is we kind of brainstorm topics that people are interested in talking about, and then we vote on them, and then whatever gets the most votes wins. And so feel free to jump into this spreadsheet or call out topics to me and I'll type them in. People can write their names. Like I'm going to put my name here, and basically you get as many votes as you want. You can vote for whatever topics you're interested in, and we'll just see whichever topic gets the most votes. And so anyone want to start brainstorming on topics?
Consciousness.
Hare Krishnas.
Consciousness.
Consciousness. Oh, that's a very interesting one that I hope that I have some interesting insights on. So that's yeah, I'll vote for that. Anyone else want to mention topics? Yeah, Neville.
Lifelong learning and education. I suppose there's a lot of presumptions about learning processes and what education is.
That's a great topic. And so if people can jump in here, and then you can put your votes next to the different topics. Go ahead, and you can also add your own topics to the left. Any other topics that people want to call out?
I have one. I've been lately pondering on the culture, and I'm still trying to figure out definitions about culture. But the culture of hustle and the hustle culture and competition and growth, just the extent of those form of culture that we find in a capitalistic system versus innovation and growth.
Got it. Culture of competition, growth, capitalism. Does that cover it?
Yeah, in regard to innovation and solutions, yeah.
How do we discern truth is a very interesting one. Gosh, I love these topics. So I think we're going to cover all this stuff eventually. So don't worry about which one we cover tonight, because these are all super interesting, and I'm going to add them to the survey of topics that I want to get people's feedback on going forward, because these are all really good topics. Any other topics people have?
Yeah.
I'm new. I hope it's okay if I suggest something.
Please.
why do we need people's opinions for our happiness, or do we need it?
Do you mean
A lot.
validation?
So I'm going to call that like on self-worth. Is that like, how should we derive our self-worth? Is that kind of what you're
Yeah.
getting at?
Self-worth, yeah, I think generally when people, whether they like us or not, it affects how we feel about ourselves. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I was wondering, I said also like validation, like the need for validation. Would that go for that? Would that go into it too? Because that's been a big beef of mine. Why do I need validation?
Yeah, no, that's a really important one. I have a paper on self-worth, and I would love to, cover that as a topic. Advantages, disadvantages of capitalism versus socialism, economic theory, a lot of fun. Cool. What other topics? These are great. I've never come up with such a good brainstorming of topics, guys. I mean, like, I've never had an audience come up with such a good brainstorming of topics. I literally am super passionate about every single one of these. So, what else? Medical model versus criminal model for drug use. That's a great one, Elliot. I have a paper on drugs as well. How do we build a better society? Great one. Something I've thought quite a bit about, and the reason that I started the Free Thinker Institute is to try to help build a better society. That's exactly the purpose of the organization, is to build a better society. And for me, a better society is one in which we all help each other be the best version of ourselves, and where everyone makes enough money that they don't have to worry about money, and we're spreading good ideas that increase happiness and decrease harm, and doing so when being loyal to truth and having an open mind, and all the 5 intentions that you'll read about on the website if you go to it. What other topics?
Free will.
Free will is a great one. That's like one of my oldest papers is free will. Do we have it or not? And why? Is that fair?
Yes.
Yeah, Neville.
Yeah, actually, sort of thinking about the whole free will in the psychology. I'm just about to propose the sort of sociological side on that, and in fact, probably challenge the whole enterprise by saying, why did the free thought movement, why did the free thought movement fail? Sociology, structure, or free flow?
I'm gonna have to do some Googling if we cover that one, because I actually don't know the answer to that. All the other ones, I have a good answer to, but that one
I'm. You could reword it. So you can reword it. I kind of think of the book titles, but you can reword it. But what it's about is, the free thought vision of society, is around free flow. And yet, sociologically, we know that, structure is important. So that's the challenge.
Yeah. So I want to encourage everyone to come into the spreadsheet and put their votes in. And Elliot had another good one. How much respect should society accord the tenets of religious faith? That's a very complicated, nuanced, and also important subject. So thanks for that, Elliot.
Mm-hmm.
How do you access this spreadsheet and vote?
So in the chat, there's a link, the Google Docs link. Will let you go in there, and then you'll just put your name in a column like Yen did and like I did, and then you put number 1 next to anything you want to vote for, and then just leave it blank if you don't want to vote for it. And so I'm gonna create a sum total of everything, that all the votes.
Garrett, we can think about it and do it later, right? We don't have to do it right at this moment.
You don't have to do it right at this moment, but once all the topics are in, then I would love everyone to put their votes in, because we're going to pick a topic hopefully within the next 5 or 10 minutes so that we can get into the meat of the
Oh, okay.
conversation. But yeah, you have a little bit of time. Jeff, Electoral College is a good one.
I was wondering also with how much respect should society accord to the tenets of religious faiths? There was a meetup that was really interesting about a moral society, the concept of a moral society nowadays, and I remember the notion of religious teachings, which we think about in terms of religion teachings, and we forget that this is how we address those, right? So what kind of relevance do they have in our modern society, those religious teachings?
Yep, and I think that's covered. If I'm not misunderstanding, I think that's covered by the how much respect.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I think that's covered with that one, and it is an interesting thing. Like, a very complicated and nuanced. Like, these are a lot of really good meaty subjects that we'll have an interesting conversation about. So, any other subjects we could? I mean, this is a great list, so we don't necessarily need more. But if people have more that they want to share, by all means, go ahead and do it. But let's sort of close out the additional questions in the next minute or two, and then take our votes.
Yeah, hello everybody, I'm new. My name is M. Can we perhaps add MBTI cognition, that side of psychology, Myers-Briggs, cognitive preferences?
Yeah, what about cognitive preferences do you want to cover?
Just like the functions and how I'm trying to gain a more in-depth understanding of just MBTI in general, and how my preferences compared to other people's.
So how should we use it?
More, I guess, more of
or like understanding the different preferences.
Right. So understanding why somebody chooses to express something differently than me or you, just the language and the values underneath the expression of the cognitive preferences.
Got it. Great. Any other last minute additions to the list of subjects? I think we have a great list here. So, and thank you guys. Like I'm a very big believer in what I call, I wrote a paper on what I call many tasking, which is many people focused on one task, which is what we're doing in this spreadsheet right now. Like lots of us focusing on creating one voting list. And you guys did a great job of self-organizing around, like, you know, changing the column size so that we could see everything. And, you know, so this is a great exercise in collaboration. So thanks everyone for doing that, for whoever changed the column size and for everyone adding their names. I love stuff like this because you can get, you know, I've done exercises like this for work where we got incredible amounts of work done with a team of like 5 to 10 people all working on one task at the same time. And, you know, we did huge process improvement, like by many tasking and working in the same doc at once. So it seems like, how do we better discern truth and what are the advantages and disadvantages? Has anyone not voted that wants to vote?
Oh,
Go ahead.
I have not voted. I want to vote.
No problem, Ingnan. Not everybody uses Google Docs, and I get it. My own mom does not love Google Docs, and I'm in love with Google Docs. So what am I going to do? So,
you mentioned the right word, mom.
well,
a lot of moms, we do not know how to use Google Docs.
If you want to learn another time, I'll teach you one-on-one. So reach out to me.
Thank you.
I'm happy to show you. It's very cool. Like I used to use Excel in a lot the way that Google Docs is used, back when Excel was done on a shared drive and Google Docs didn't exist yet. And when Google Docs came out and made it all real time instead of like a couple minutes delay, I was super excited. So
That's wonderful.
yeah, I'm a big user of these types of technologies. So oh, it looks like advantages and disadvantages of capitalism versus socialism just pulled ahead. Anyone not vote that wanted to? Because right now we have a clear winner on that one.
I think I'm just like I'm lost. I don't know how to get back to the, I thought I did with the.
So in your web browser, you should be able to pull up Google Docs. And,
yeah, no, I'm just, I'm a little, it's just like between the viewing, the share option, I'm just like a little.
It may be confusing because like my screen is showing the.
No, I got it. Got it. Yeah,
okay.
Got it. I'll vote if you give me 1 second. Yeah, thank you.
Great, go ahead. Don't change column B, that's the summary. Don't change column B. It's
sorry. Yeah, sorry. Sorry.
No.
Hold on. Where do I? Oh, okay. I just put
So
my
just
name.
add your name up here. Yep.
Sorry.
That's okay. It's a learning experience for many. So there we go. Now I see your name, Natalie. Is it Natalie? Is that pronounced right? Okay, cool.
Yep. Yep.
Has anyone not voted that wanted to?
Can you add me?
Yeah, where do you want to vote?
Because I'm using my cell phone. It's kind of
Don't worry,
difficult.
just tell me where you want to vote and I'll
yeah. How do we better discern the truth?
How do we better discern the truth? All right, and then anything else you wanted to vote for?
No. Consciousness, okay. Perhaps consciousness.
Consciousness, okay.
Actually, I think that, I'm sorry, I think that actually the one that I mentioned could also fall for the advantages and disadvantages of capitalism versus socialism or something like that, of that sort. I think it kind of meets the culture of competition, growth, capitalism, innovation, maybe. Those two are kind of like.
Yeah, and we can kind of potentially weave between two different subjects because we have a tie between better discern truth and the advantages and disadvantages of capitalism versus socialism. Those are both really good subjects. I guess
some subjects can be kind of like together in a way.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to think if there's a way to tie the two together. And there probably is, like, I would kind of, maybe what I'm going to suggest is because, we have, for those that can stay the whole time, Jeff, go ahead.
Maybe you can combine them and say, how can we discern the truth regarding capitalism versus socialism?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Like, yeah, that's a great idea. Like, because like, and that's kind of where I was going, is like thinking about first, how do we discern the truth? And then how do we use that truth to decide on the advantages of capitalism versus socialism?
I think you should stick to your plan and just do it the way. It doesn't really matter, because whatever we talk about now that these things have all been put on the table, if they're relevant, they'll get it. And then the rest of them are for other weeks. I mean,
and
I just casted one more
vote. How do we
vote.
better discern the truth came out one ahead now, so someone changed their vote, and or another person voted or something like that, and now it's one ahead. So let's start with how do we better discern the truth, and if we can get to like, if we come to a conclusion on that, then we can go into the advantages and disadvantages of capitalism versus socialism, economic systems. That is a pretty meaty subject, right? There's a lot written on that, and it's complicated. So how do we discern truth is, I think, simpler, but like
truth is easy. We'll get done with that real fast, and then we can move on to the world.
Well, I think you're joking, but like I kind of find that I think that it is a little easy. So let's have the conversation and see if we do agree that it's easy, and maybe we won't. But for me, like I have a paper on epistemology, and like I think I have a clear vision of like how to discern truth. But let's talk about it. So yeah, I'm gonna let's start with that, because that won by one vote, just by a hair. So let's talk about how we discern truth. And I'm gonna throw something out there, which is essentially what I like. I have a saying that is kind of like, I follow I try to follow evidence and logic. Wherever evidence and logic lead is where I follow. And essentially that's my way of getting to truth, is through evidence. We had a meetup like a week or two, maybe it was 2 weeks ago, about how science is compatible with religion and spirituality. And we talked about how there are these different types of knowledge bases, consistent ones, which is like what science is, what science is striving to be in the long run, and then inconsistent knowledge bases, which is like science, like spirituality and religion, and how they both have a place. But I guess for me, like if science has a good truth, like a good answer to like whether or not something is true, I generally trust it because it's consistent and it's a growing body of knowledge that improves on itself. And it's based on very evidence-based and repeatable experiments-based insights. But what it can't tell you is like things like what's the meaning of your life, right? Things about like a person's personal opinions that don't conflict with objective reality. We kind of have to trust people's opinions are what they are. And so I'll say that as kind of like a lead in into the conversation, and then kind of to seed the conversation, and then would love to hear people's thoughts and reflections and opinions. Yeah, Neville.
What's discernment? Because you put the question, how do we discern truth? And I understand propositional truth, so I've read at least a little bit in that on logic, and also I understand evidential propositions to truth. But what does discernment mean?
Who was it that originally wrote the question? Because it's probably better to let them interpret. I mean, I can give my interpretation, but I'd rather the original author of it, because like I wrote it from what someone said. Was it you, Natalie?
Can I ask maybe, it seems a very large topic. It's almost like the entire definition of philosophy in itself. Right? Because that's kind of the goal in it. So could we just maybe tailor it a little bit for just a more hands-on topic, a little more,
Actually, I didn't vote for that, even though before I logged in, I was thinking I wanted to do truth because I didn't like the word discern. But now I'm realizing that the discern is not a problem. My version of it is, where do we find the truth?
Yeah,
and really, the two big camps there are: it's inside, we look within, and the other one is we look out into the world. And so if we did that, then I could change my vote and we'd have 8 or whatever.
There you go. So it's a winner by two votes. And actually, that's very consistent, Jeff, with what we talked about in the science versus spirituality religion, is that there's truths about the world, which is looking outside, which is what you said. And then there's looking internally, which is what are my own truths? Things that I believe, like, do I like Cheerios or cornflakes? Like, those are my own, what's the meaning of my life? And so those are the things that we decide for ourselves, which are subjective truths is what I called them. I didn't see who raised their hand between Yen, Tat, and Remco.
Can you hear me though? This is Yen.
So why don't we just go Yen, Tat, and Remco? So Yen, you go next.
Can you hear me though?
You're very quiet, actually.
Okay, I was trying to speak, but how can you hear me all right though, or not?
I can hear you. I just have to strain, but I can hear you.
Okay. I proposed the question, and the discern can be changed by determine. Also, some of the other threads that people talked about was that, as opposed to where, I wanted to know how you can determine the truth. And you can start by basically, how does you define truth? Garrett did it. Okay, what he defined it as, or how I define it as reality, but then what is reality? And how do you prove it, though, is through the scientific method, is what I was getting at. Everything else is subjective, how we perceive it, how we perceive reality, that is. And I can actually clarify further. Let me just say is that what I'm trying to is that through the scientific method, you can find the cause of something. And if you find the cause, you can replicate it over and over again, in which case then you establish truth. Things you cannot replicate are somewhere you can't really rely on it then, such as people choosing to lie or choosing to change something, just changing one's mind, let's say, such as a preference or opinion. All those are subjective. So I think is how you define truth. That if you define truth as personal truth, then it's very hard to determine, and you can change by based on your mood from day to day. Thank you.
Great.
I'm done.
Thanks, Yen. Tat, and I apologize. I think I don't know if that's your name. I feel like it's something else, but I don't remember your name, although I remember your face.
Well, that's okay. I would just like to offer a very short and simple definition of truth, but I would just also like to add a caveat before I give the definition. And a caveat is that truth being a word that we use to communicate, that's all it is. It's not the thing itself. It's just a pointer pointing to something. So the only thing I think that with words that's important is that two people have the same understanding of whatever word they use. So in that sense, the definitions are arbitrary. But the arbitrary definition that I would offer for truth is a very simple one. Truth is that which does not change.
Great, thanks. Remco.
Yeah. Hey, and I just want to open a great way of creating a consensus for a topic for discussion. I love it, and I love the way he used Google Docs there, Garrett. It's a little bit time consuming, but we can hone in what the majority is sort of interested in, and yeah, look, great model. I think what immediately flashed to mind when we start to talk about truth is Karl Popper. And he was a philosopher of science, and his thesis was about whether some hypothesis is falsifiable, and it's not on. You immediately reject it as potential. Somebody may be more expert on Karl Popper, but my understanding is that if you have a hypothesis and it's not falsifiable, then you don't have a hypothesis. You have a belief, and I think that's a good first step towards the path of truth. But then, how far do you take this? My favorite, is to think in terms of physics. And, and we have to start somewhere, and I could start anywhere. Let's start with Newton. Newton had this wonderful, a theory which involved an ether and non-local forces, and it drifted on for 2 centuries. But then they had troubles and they had troubles, with Mercury. Mercury had this aberrant behavior. So they started to think, there's something wrong with the theory. And it took someone like Einstein to come along. But what really irks me, what gets to me all the time is, when I keep reading, this general theory of relativity has been proven yet again. And I'm saying, well, you got all this dark matter that you can't handle, and you've got there's other features of the theory. So is it truth? And I'm saying, no, it is just an hypothesis that is so far working. And it's likewise, you can poke around with quantum theory, one of my pet interests, and you get the same sort of enigmas sitting at the heart. And you're saying, well, is it truth? And I have a great deal of difficulty, therefore, with any notion of truth. It's just a momentary, a moment in time consensus, and it works. It satisfies our current thinking, but is it truth? Don't know.
That's a great point, Remco. I think, and it sounds like you're talking about how truth evolves, and I'll touch on that when it's my turn. But I want to let Jeff go because he had his hand up. Jeff Nugent.
Sorry, I had some competing sounds going on in the background here.
No worries.
So I would offer that truth may be found in the consideration of a proposition, and that if something is not provable, it really can't progress beyond being a theory. And it may be a widely accepted theory, and yet we have to, given our there are things we think are true and that we know, and things there that we think we don't know, and there are always things we don't know that we don't know. That my proposition is that we would take the word tentative and put it in front of conclusions and make it all one word. That everything is a theory until it's proven wrong, and so sort of respecting intellectual humility in the pursuit of truth, I think would probably be a wise move. But nonetheless, I think that this consideration of truth is really what we do with propositions in order to determine whether or not we're willing to accept and act upon them as theories, and then we'll see what happens. In terms of how the environment changes, how we change, how the results of our experiments change, et cetera, et cetera.
Great, thanks, Jeff. Natalie, do you want to go next, and then Claudio will be after that, and then I'll chime in after that.
Yeah, thank you. I need also, can you let me know how you do that, how you have those people line up? Does it do that automatically when you raise your hand?
It seems to put the people with the hands in the upper left-hand corner for me, which I love.
Okay.
Yeah, it does do that automatically.
But did you choose that option, or?
Not intentionally, just
it does it
kind of working.
It does it like automatically? Okay,
yeah,
good.
It seems to do it automatically.
Yeah, for truth, I think I remember from logic or arguments that it, in order for something to be true, it had to be true and valid. So this is why I was just thinking of two notions. When people were talking about provable, I would say verifiable. I like that term too. So maybe it's a combination of some, thesis and hypothesis or anything that needs to be verifiable through proofs, arguments, or a scientific experiment. But then when it comes to abstract notions, sometimes we need maybe a consensus to decide on the definition. This is why I think for me, truth would be a combination of being verifiable and something that is debatable in its definition first, to agree upon with people on what we're talking about, so that the topic or so that we can argue about the same thing and not off topic. And this is why I always think that dialogue precedes opinion. There needs to be some kind of a conversation before an opinion is set. And I think this is what we're missing today. We don't have, people are confused and easily directed one way or the other, because they don't have that kind of back structure to understand definition, and verification. And so they go right away into opinion without really understanding what we are talking. When we're talking, what is it that we're talking about? So I would say something verifiable, provable, but also that invites or requires consensus when it comes to definition. For more abstract notions that cannot be really verifiable in some ways. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Claudio, do you want to go next? And then I didn't see between Remco and Yen who was first, but Claudio, you go next, and then I'll go, and then Neville, and then I'm going to go Remco and then Yen.
I'm sorry, Garrett, I'm really sorry. I just wanted to say that in what I just said, that would go against what someone said about that is not changeable. I would say that actually, because it has to constantly readjust a consensus, that actually the concept of truth may be actually changeable. But thank you.
Sure. So Claudio.
Oh, yes, yeah. Well, you can discover truth through, empirical methods, right? Through experience, observations. A lot of scientists do it that way, like using their, scientific tools like microscopes. In the physics field, the Large Hadron Collider, you can use it. You can acquire the truth through a priori methods. Where you have theoretical reductions. Like based on reason. For example. If you know what let's say a cat means, then you know that cats are, animals. If you know about the natural evolution, then you can discover truths about common ancestry, for example, without actually experiencing it, right? So, but then you have some people who believe that you can discover truth through, religious experiences and mystical experiences. Then you have subjective truths, which we talked about in the previous meeting. For example, I like eating vegetables, so that's, I believe, a subjective. I believe vegetables are good for me. So that's a subjective truth, right? Yeah, so,
if you like vegetables, that's a subjective truth, in my opinion, by the way that I described it at the other meetup. So yeah.
Actually, I do like vegetables. Yeah.
That's great.
Thank
Good
you.
for you. I do too, actually. If they're seasoned well.
Yeah, they're good for you. Yeah.
They are. Anything else you wanted to say, Claudio?
No, that was all, actually. Thank you.
Oh, no problem. So I'm gonna sort of hit on what might be the elephant in the room, and say that I think that there is in the world, and I'm gonna still try to be as politically correct as I can in saying this. I think that there is a war on truth going on about, who to trust with the truth, who has the actual truth. And there are lots of different versions of the truth going on, like being passed about and being passed off as truth to certain people. And in sort of recognition of that, I wrote a paper on trust, and what I think makes someone more trustworthy as a source of truth. Because I made the argument a couple weeks ago that there's objective truth, which is like truths about objective reality learnable through repeatable experiments, and how science gradually becomes more and more certain of those truths. And I see truth as a probabilistic thing, not an absolute yes or no. It's just how likely is something to be true. And subjective truths are what we define for ourselves. So we can kind of decide that and then, be as certain as we are about it. But I posted my paper on like what I think makes someone trustworthy. And, there are basically 11 bullet points, which if we have time later, I'll get into. If we have like a blank space, I'll go into what I think makes someone a trustworthy source of truth. But for now, I want to go back to, or go to Neville next. Go ahead, Neville. Maybe he's occupied. So let's jump to Remco, and then we'll come back to Neville.
I need that to find the bank record. Sorry.
That's okay. Are you ready, Neville?
Yeah, so I think the question, this is the problem with global conversations.
Right.
For you guys, it's a leisurely evening discussion. For me, I'm in the middle of not in work, but I got a home office and I'm dealing with, domestic issues as well. And with our motoring association thing, bureaucracy, they can't, we've got a clear evidence that, that the car was attended to and they can't find the record. I mean, anyway.
Yeah.
So
no worries.
Truth.
So truth.
This is the
truth is the cars are attended to, but
this is because I'm a historian, for those that don't know me, and this is it. If you don't have a record, it's almost as if there's no truth there. The absurdity of life, and I'm reading Sartre and Sartre's review of Camus at the moment, and I suppose anyway. But my point was really about change and in relation to truth. I mean. So, this is it. So thinking about Thomas Kuhn's sort of paradigm shifts idea and in the history world, it sort of relates to Hegel in some sense that because we're operating in a world of perception in time, in terms of the comment that was made about definitions before by Natalie, I think was very good, because that changes in particularly from context to context, but it's hard to see a universal definition of truth across time and space, I suppose. I suppose there's a working definition in terms of language, but I wonder whether that's also temporal, that's trapped in particular historical settings probably over large times. It doesn't sort of fluctuate, but over, yeah.
Great. Anything else, Neville?
No, is that shocking, is it?
Let's let Remco go next.
Oh, Garrett, I think you opened a Pandora's box there, mate, when you started to talk about...
I totally intentionally did, Remco. When I declared that there's a war on truth, I opened Pandora's box very intentionally.
Yeah, you did indeed, with trust. Trust.
Let's just try to stay polite. That's my only rule about the Free Thinkers Institute, is we have to stay polite, but let's be honest and polite.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, I think I'm digressing from what I was going to say, but I think one of the consequences of this explosion, this hyperabundance of information, we're overwhelmed with knowledge, and it's beyond our capacity to handle it. And what I think it is doing to our society, to us all, is we're losing our cognitive sovereignty. I'm using that term, I'm plagiarizing it, I love it. Cognitive sovereignty. We no longer have a capacity to judge and evaluate. We're getting all this stuff and we have to, what do we have to do? We have to trust, and we have to trust in institutions. And some of these institutions have got rather dubious backgrounds, or have been lumped with institutions that have been involved with scandals, and it's a whole topic in its own right. In fact, I'm doing a webinar on it later on this year. But look, trust, I want to get back on something I feel very passionate about is to, and I opened up in saying this, that we have to make the distinction between a belief and and a hypothesis. And if you are promoting something that cannot be falsified, then drop it, forget it, don't debate it. It's not, and that immediately dispenses with a lot of discussion. And let's stay with something that can be proven false. If you can't bring up something and say, well, can you prove it false? Forget it. There is a problem in society, and that affects your topic too, Garrett, in terms of, alternative truth, is tribalism. And tribalism has always been alive and well, including in science. I had to think back to the days, getting back to open up in my example with Newton. And Newton had his followers on his theory of corpuscular light, that light was in particles. And that was the predominant thinking of the time. And along comes this a young medical student, Thomas Young, and he says, well, I think the evidence is that it's actually wave-like. Well, he got howled down. He got howled down by all the Newton followers. And that sort of line of thinking continues on today. There is definitely tribalism, and it tends to drown out, particularly if you're in one camp or the other by thinking, and it can go on for a long time. I don't know what is a good example, but Charles Darwin. I mean, has a very respectable presence in society. It was a classic episteme, as was it Foucault? No, Derrida, yeah, Jacques Derrida, as an episteme, a great change in society, Darwin's theory. But it's carried on for 100 years as the survival of the fittest. It's carried on. You probably were trained. My chair just collapsed on me. My goodness, I have had 4 years out of it. Anyhow, I'm just a bit low now. But anyway, Darwin, survival of the fittest. These sociologists and anthropologists are now saying, well, it isn't actually survival of the fittest. No, that is Charles Darwin looking at the world through his Victorian lenses. And they're now saying it's about cooperation. It's about those that cooperate the best. So, that is what the thesis is actually about. So I don't know whether it's a particularly good example, and perhaps I've talked so long already. I really would like to talk about more specifics. But yeah, I think what I'm trying to say is we have to be careful of tribalism and yeah, I was going to go and talk about Niels Bohr, but let's stop with that. Tribalism.
Great, thanks. And I think when you're saying tribalism, you're talking about sort of the normal beliefs of the time, or the predominant beliefs of the time, which are often questioned by someone who is creating a big innovation. And I agree with you that big innovations, Galileo, we know what happened to him, right? Didn't go very well for Galileo. So but he was a visionary, and the visionaries are often not treated so well by modern society that they come up in. So Neville, just so you know, your hand is still up. You may want to put it down if you want, and then just raise it again if you had another question. Yen, go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me better now? I changed mics.
No,
I really had technical problems. Sorry. I mean, I can never get to the bottom of my screen because the ribbon just hides the buttons on.
Oh, so
how do you get over that?
Take the top part of your monitor and like the top part of the window and make it a little smaller, and then
I do that, and I can make it.
And then pull it,
I never
push it up, and then push it up, and then you should see the mute button. And if you can see the mute button, then you should be able to see the reaction button, and the reaction button is where you raise your hand.
It is so user unfriendly. It is so bloody user unfriendly,
Yeah, I get it.
That's a topic for the future. why IT designers,
I will tell you,
don't understand that, the
Neville,
problem.
have compassion. It's very hard to create user-friendly software. I'm trying to do it right now. It's hard.
Yeah, I appreciate,
So,
but see, I've minimized it. I've got the whole box there.
Right.
But I go to more. Where do I go to?
So not more.
Reactions.
To the left of that where
Okay,
it says
fine. I got it.
reactions. Yep, there you
Right.
go. Perfect. So Yen, go ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me any better
You're
now?
a little bit better now, actually.
A little bit better, louder?
Yeah, you're louder.
Yeah, I want to comment on people's definitions of truth and the limits that what I hear. And my overall point is that truth is important to the point that if you're going to act on it, such as you're going to declare someone a witch and burn them, you want to make sure you got the right definition at least, okay? Or at least have some tool to decipher that justly. But I like to also, if just go back to Remco's, I want to step through other people's definitions there, but Remco can you give an example of when you said that the truth is falsifiable or whatever? Can you just give an example real quick? And then I'll continue.
Yeah, you're asking me for an example of something which can be falsifiable.
Right.
Yeah.
So therefore it's true. Okay, just apply that formula for me.
Earth is an oblate spheroid, right? Like that's falsifiable. You can prove that Earth is flat or it's an oblate spheroid. There's 300,000 flat earthers in America, so just putting it out there. There is a war on truth going on, whether we like it or not.
Well, okay. If you're using, say, you have a certain amount of people that believe the Earth is flat, so is that the truth then, or not? So which is a sphere or a flat? I mean, how do you apply that rule?
So to me, like it's about like what's the more probabilistic truth, and if you take a plane and you start flying in one direction for a really long time, and you end up in the same place that you started from, it's pretty clear that Earth's not flat at that point. And in fact, there was a funny news article that I read where flat earthers pooled their money together to spend $20,000 to prove that the Earth was flat and ended up proving themselves wrong. And I was like, if only every flat earther had the same determination as those flat earthers, we wouldn't have any flat earthers left.
So they changed their beliefs? Because I know I heard in the news that actually one person shot himself up in a rocket in order to see it for himself, okay, that the world's flat or sphere, and then killed himself in the process. So now it goes to my point, though. I mean, I'm just thinking that example now is that if you were wrong about the truth, it literally killed him. So I'll go back to one of the other examples about that's not changeable was given as a reason. If that's the case, then I could, the statement is that I am alive at this time, but I know I will be dead down the road. That's changeable. So then we can say that I'm not really alive. No, we shouldn't use that rule either, I'm thinking. Well, another definition or another quality of truth was given us as verifiable. So something along those lines, as an example that I heard, is that Claudio likes vegetables. Now, if his wife likes them, he can back him up and says, yes, I'm a witness of that. He likes vegetables. However, if she divorced him and may just want to screw him and just said, no, he never said he liked vegetables. Okay, that's with that definition is changeable. So you can't do anything with it that you want to rely your life or someone else's life on it. That's where if you can predictably make a profit, we call that science because it's predictable. You can replicate it if you find the cause. Those kind of examples, such as you can calculate sunrise, and we have done it for so long that we don't expect that we'll be off by much by calculating when sunrise will be for tomorrow. And notice the limits of what we're talking about here is with Newtonian mechanics, even as primitive and maybe compared to other things that we've discovered and better tools down the road we have, it was good enough to get us to the moon. However, if we want to measure the speed of light at that levels, there will be some errors at those limits. Okay, at those extremes, I'll say. So certain things we can prove within certain parameters. And my original point was that if you're going to act on it, you want to know what the truth is to make a good judgment of some sort, especially when it's of consequence. So therefore, stick to, in other words, you won't burn that witch if you stick to the definitions that, well, could I prove that this person, I mean, now I'm going off that I'm making things up. I don't know how to prove someone's in a witch, first of all. But if you could, you want to say, can I replicate this? If that person is a witch, I guess gives birth to another witch, then I guess you replicated it genetically. But I'm just saying, you don't want to. You can be more tolerant if you don't give yourself such a low standard of what truth is. And I'll end by saying that one person on the meetup defined it as, if 3 people tell me something's true, he said, maybe in a joking way, but he says, I just take it as truth then. And then that's a very low standard. You would burn that witch then if 3 people told you that she was a witch.
And in fact, that's exactly what happened at the Salem witch trials. Is enough people said it that everybody believed it. And yet, I think you're hitting on a really, really important point here, which is like, what are we going to do with this information? And if we're going to make life or death decisions on the question of truth, like the question of whether or not something is true becomes so much more important than if it's just a matter of like, do I like Cheerios or cornflakes, right? Which is not, a life or death decision. If I like Cheerios and I eat cornflakes, no big deal. But like, if someone's going to die based on that, being true or false, it becomes more important. So with that, I want to, if I can, just quickly touch on like what I think makes someone trustworthy, which is, I think that if someone is polite and, consistently saying things that are validated through external means and objective means, that makes them more trustworthy. If they make logical arguments, if they expect you to rely on your own judgment rather than tell you to trust them blindly. I don't really trust anyone that tells me to trust them blindly. I want them to prove to me why they're right. And then, if they are honest about what they don't know, if they're knowledgeable in their field, if they tell you things that are helpful to you in a positive way, and if they tell you things that are not in their own best interests, those are things that all create credibility. If they say something that may be clearly against your current opinion, it takes a little bit of courage to like tell someone something that disagrees with their current beliefs. And so that creates more trust for me, like that at least they're hopefully willing to challenge me with something that is new. And then I think it's important to fact check people, and people who stand up to fact checks become more credible, and people who don't stand up to fact checks become less credible. And I think if someone tries too hard to convince you, that's, there are different scenarios there. And I wrote about that in my paper, which I posted in the reference channel in Discord.
But that will be subjective.
What's that?
That would be subjective, whether someone is working too hard to convince you.
So you have to use your own judgment. So everything in life is subjective because we're all viewing it from our own perspective. But like, if you believe that someone is trying too hard to convince you, then that's what I'm talking about.
I think that's not a very good criteria because it's so subjective. Whereas just like
that's fine. Yeah, you're welcome to disagree with the criteria. I'm just saying my opinion. You're totally entitled to disagree with my opinion. Like I have no problem with you disagreeing. But that's kind of, and then the last thing is about whether or not someone is practicing flattery. And so if someone is being flattering, that can be both good and bad. And then I talk about in the paper about why that could be both good and bad. With that said, those are sort of things that I use to gauge whether or not someone is a trustworthy source. And then Natalie, why don't you go ahead and share your next thoughts? You're on mute.
Thank you. Yeah. There's so many things. I think there's so many things that you talked about. I just wanted to say, like, for me, there was a difference between true and truth. So it's not true. Is it true versus truth? The encompassing of the notion, which might take a whole conversation or forever to talk about. Is this true? Then someone mentioned beliefs. Yes, I really believe that there is, or I think there is a difference between beliefs and opinions. Nowadays, people tend to attach more importance to their beliefs, and instead of opinions, which I think would probably be a part of, having a little bit more debate and trying to just find some to research a little bit and to try to have some background context information. Beliefs is far much more stronger these days. It is also because it represents a group. And when you're talking about people who say, well, if the group think that it's true, then everybody's going to agree with that. That goes back to our humanity, right? We don't want to really stray too much far from the group. And that could be also about peer pressure into thinking one way or thinking that it is true, that something is true. So that would be something about the group cohesion, why some people tend to think that. I think what is important for me about what is true and the fact that it kind of seems to disappear at some point, people actually kind of decide what their reality is. And it's because lately I've pondered on the concept of narratives. People actually have their own narratives now. And this is what is going to be the truth in their reality. That's their narrative. So it doesn't even mean for them to be verifiable or to be agreed. It has to be accepted. There's no conversation about it anymore. And it's not really it's a reality based on a narrative. So it doesn't have to be provable or verifiable. This is why you end up having all those strange, theories that seems, implausible. But I think it's just that. It seems like people latch onto those because it defines them as an element of rebellion. It's something different. It's a story that they're creating. It's almost fascinating. They're recreating their whole reality. They are doing it now as it's happening, right? They don't have much context to pull back on. I think it's the term narrative. There was something that I was really obsessed with, this article that came out in the New Yorker about cults. And I wanted to post that on my French show that I really love. It's in French, unfortunately, but they invited this Canadian cognitive psychologist, psycholinguist, Steven Pinker. He just published a book that is supposed to be fun, and it's called Rationality. So they asked him, what's going on with all this madness? We're going mad. And he was saying, well, weirdly enough, we're mostly rational beings. On a daily basis, by the minute, we're pretty rational. We act rationally. It tends to be really strange when in certain spheres, and that's the fear of opinion. That's when you have a lot of things. I think it has to do with purpose, goals, agendas, group. That's where we become, according to this guy, we're becoming less rational. And he's actually talking about, he said the same thing that this journalist said in the New Yorker, and I'll post also the article about cults, is that it's the allure of narratives. Everybody's a sucker for a good story. And coming from literature, I thought, oh, here we go. We'll do anything for that. And we're just very gullible, right? So that's what I wanted to say about what's happening. I think there's a whole thing that has happened over the centuries, right? This has always happened, but now it's becoming big because I think now we're like, okay, we see like few groups. Now we have the people who are like, well, I need to make sure that it's true, that it's verifiable, that it's valid. And some people are like, no, this is my story. And this is my people's story right now. We don't care what you think. So that's it. Yes, thank you, Shukran.
You're muted, Garrett.
Sorry, I was just gonna say I agree. Like I hear you, Natalie, and like people telling themselves stories and believing what they want to believe to be true as being true is like a big point. And I would argue that there was a good article written called I forget, it was like Red Religion, Blue Church, Red Religion, and what it was about is that only in the last 10 or 20 years has social media empowered the individual to reach so many people. In the past, it was always like institutions that were, reliant on people trusting them, that were sharing and disseminating information en masse. And so only now in like the last couple of decades has mass transmission of information been accessible to the average person who may be completely misinformed, but can still share their ideas with, you know, massive amounts of people. And so, you know, I think that's a big distinction between modern society. And so now more than ever in history, is it important for every one of us to think with critical thinking skills for ourselves, which is part of why I started the Free Thinker Institute, is to teach people to improve their critical thinking skills so we can each be better at discerning fact from fiction. So I think Jens' topic is super important, because discerning fact from fiction is a really important thing. And actually, you know, the articles that I've read say that fake news travels faster than real news, which is a really scary place for us to be, that people's critical thinking skills are so bad that they believe the fake news more often and spread the fake news more often than the real news. And so with that said, I'm going to pass it on to Remco.
Yeah, I thought between the two of you there, I think you're making a very interesting, Natalie and Garrett, you're starting to touch on a topic which is close to my heart. And that is this problem that we have in society today, that we've got this hyperabundance of information. You know, 5 centuries ago, you went to the village priest to get knowledge about the world. And today, we've got this hyperabundance of information, and it's incredibly difficult to discern fact from fiction. And add to that, having the access today to knowledge about all the scandals, and those scandals that come from very high places. And if we can, we'll put them into prison like Julian Assange, you know. I mean, hey, once upon a time it was heresy. Today it is sedition. You know, hey, just two sides of the hand, isn't it? Heresy and sedition. And what's the difference, really? It's about power and institutions and the diminishment thereof. And I think we need to be yeah, I trapped myself there. I'm going down a cul-de-sac there, or a dangerous one. But, you know, the point is that I think we are challenged with this hyperabundance of information, and we're not prepared to trust. And so we will latch onto and engage echo chambers and, you know, information silos and create, you know, an artificial reality. The only problem I have, is it any different? Has that always been the case? It's just that it's been made more visible to us today. I don't know, but anyhow, yeah, I was going to say something. I think the other thing about truth, and perhaps I'm getting a bit carried away here. The other thing about truth is sometimes we need to stop and question and look at the very heart of what we believe is truth. I mean, look, I dare say I'm not alone here, but I was taught at school there was a force of gravity. And now that was dismissed a century ago, yet I was still taught that there is a force of gravity. And if anybody's got any physics background, they'll know that there is no force of gravity. It is just a warp in space-time. So the truth has a long persistence. And sometimes we need to say, well, what's the evidence for that? And what we have today with gravity and with general relativity theory is something that works, but so did Newton's theory. And we're prepared to blind eye, you know, some very fundamental questions about it. What the hell is space-time? And to conclude also in quantum physics, at the very heart are enigmas, and we're rolling on with the narrative of the most accurate, thorough science that we've yet produced, because it's extraordinarily accurate, and yet at its very heart remains enigmas that Niels Bohr had to introduce the Copenhagen interpretation, which made it a strict epistemology. That is, you're creating a culture of shut up and calculate. And he made it an epistemology saying we will define quantum science as being a science where you ask nature a question and you will get an answer. There will be no ontology. And that creates a huge problem. And a century later, we're still rolling on with papers being produced, still saying, well, are we denying something? Are we denying the ontology? Are we denying the alternatives? So the whole essence of quantum science is sitting on straw. Even though we're rolling on and producing amazing results, extremely accurate outcomes, at heart, there is something fundamental. I say the same with general relativity. I say there is something very strange about it. We've rolled for 2 centuries with Newton's law, and I was taught there was a force of gravity. But hey, look, what's this dark stuff, this dark matter and dark energy? What the hell is that? But we're giving it a title and dispensing with it. Just like for a long time, there was a hypothesis that there was a planet of Vulcan between Mercury and the sun, which was hypothesized to exist to explain the aberration of the aberrant behavior of Mercury, which was later explained by general relativity theory. Anyway, it might sound all incoherent, but all I'm trying to say is, in the end, and to conclude, that sometimes we need to stop and perhaps stand back, and it takes a powerful mind to be able to stand back and say, listen, I think we've got it wrong, guys.
Yeah, I agree. It's important to challenge the status quo. Jeff, go ahead next.
Well, I couldn't have had a better introduction to what I'm about to share than Natalie and Remco. So thank you so much for that. There's been quite a bit of research over the last decade into the significance of stories, and with people being told a story and then being given statistics and then being given a test. And the story and the statistics are antithetical, and when they're asked what's true, that they by and large place more weight on the evidence provided by the story, which might be true as a single case, rather than the well-prepared and researched statistics. This was, I believe that this was a part of a book. I'm trying to remember the guy's name who wrote "Don't Think of an Elephant," and it was into political research, and that we even tend to ask the questions. George Lakoff, thank you. That the questions we ask, and the experiments we set up, and what we choose to watch, and what we choose to conclude from the results are often related to this confirmation bias, if you will, where we're looking for things to prove us right versus looking for things to prove us wrong. And so I'll just offer you what I think is one of the greatest stories about that, which is that there was a defensive tackle for the Baltimore Colts by the name of Artie Donovan, and he told this story about a rookie who came into the league, and he was drafted high and he was a great player, but he was known for, being a bit of a night owl and the guy who liked to drink and carouse. And at the end of his first season, he announces that he's going to get married. And Artie and the other guys say to him, this man, you got a lot of wild oats to sow here. Why should you get married? You're young, you're rich, you're good looking. This isn't the time to do it. And he says, no, I've fallen in love, and this is the one. And I'm going to get married. And so he goes ahead and gets married, and everything's good for about, 5 or 6 months. But then he starts going out and hanging out with the guys again and carousing and all that. And he comes home, he stays out all night one night in late October, early November, and he goes home and it's just dawn, it's just breaking. And he decides, okay, maybe if I just go in really, really quietly into the house, I'll somehow be able to get inside and get in bed, and my new wife won't realize that I was actually out all night. And he opens the door, and she's standing right there in front of him. And he says, "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry. I have to tell you, last night I came home late. It was the middle of the night, and I was just so glad to that we're married, and I love you so much. And I went over and laid down in the hammock in the backyard and looked up at the stars and just considered what a fortunate, lucky man I am. And then I fell asleep. And here, dawn, I woke up, and now I'm just kind of coming in." And she looked at him and said, "I put that hammock away 3 weeks ago." And he looked at her and said, well, that's my story and I'm sticking to it. And that's the famous line, that's my story and I'm sticking to it. So for better or worse, the human condition, exhibit A.
Great, thanks, Jeff. Neville.
Yes, I'm been thinking about the comments about trust, information discernment, and information management. And I think there's a possibility of drilling down. That is, if we just put aside or basically, I think generally accept that gut reactions, decisions on, gut reactions isn't the usual way, the normative way that we deal with things in life, then the alternative, what we do in terms of trust and information discernment and information management, is about rule formations and rule following. So, and this is a challenge for free thinkers because, as soon as you say that, there's a resistance because people think we're talking about institutional rule formation and rule following. But you've got to think about rules as just a habit that we do in daily lives ourselves with just average basic decision making. We set up ourselves rules and we share collectively the rules. We form rules. We get together and we say, well, what rules are we going to have when we face the situation X, Y, and Z? And then at each point, there's a decision about, am I going to have the integrity of following that rule? Or does the rule itself present a challenge and then I decide to break the rule? So that's my thing. I think it all comes down to, when we talk about trust, when you talk about the exposure of information and therefore how do we discern and how do we manage it, it's about, that rule formation and rule following.
Great, thanks, Neville. Yen.
Okay, wanted to talk about some of the criteria about discerning truth anyway. Like depending on experts, as we know, we're all flawed people that can basically, we can all lie. So likewise with experts, they may have hidden agendas or hidden motivations to lie, and we may not know about it. So even if you trust an expert because it's knowledgeable in the field, doesn't mean that what they produce, like doctors saying that smoking was good, to include cigarette companies coming with studies to say so, doesn't mean it's true. So if you want to rely on it for your life, you shouldn't, because people do lie. Likewise with personal arguments or personal determinations that make sense, such as arguments or logic. Usually logic means, people mean it subjectively to be as consistent with some principle that they are have observed in their lifetime. Just because it makes sense to someone, one out of the 6 billion on the earth, let's say, doesn't mean necessarily it's true. And Ron Gross likes to point out the quote that I will paraphrase along the lines of, what does it feel like to be wrong? Well, it feels like being right. People find it very hard to have the unpleasant of being wrong, and until you're proven wrong, you feel like you're right. The thing about proving it, though, is something that you cannot basically, it should be convincing, but you can replicate it over and over again, such as calculating the sunrise, so that the person year after year cannot say that, well, this was just a lucky shot. Thanks.
Great.
I'm done.
Thanks, Jan. Claudio.
Yeah, I believe what's required in order to pursue the truth or to find the truth, you need a certain amount of detachment from, for example, what you're trying to find out, your research. You need to go through it, through the process objectively, try to put your emotions aside and your bias, because we all have some amount of bias within us inside us. Even scientists can sometimes scientists are affected by bias, right? But the social media these days, TV, they kind of like distort the truth, because if you go on social media, a lot of people they mistake images for truth, and it can be very misleading. For example, you go to a site or a Twitter account that has 1 million followers of nature. You see all these beautiful pictures of nature bombarded. You can easily jump to the wrong conclusion that nature is actually all beautiful, but we all know the truth, that it has its ugly side as well. And the same with TV, which sensationalizes stories. It's very predominantly negative. You go CNN or Fox News. So people can get an accurate picture of what reality actually is. Because there's both good and bad in real life. Life has both good and bad. It's a mixture. Usually balances out for most people. We have to verify what we read, what we see, put a little bit of effort, and be careful of the sources that we choose to follow or pursue. Make sure that these are reliable sources. We have to be utilize our critical thinking, right? And but that takes effort, though. We have to learn how to do it, right? But I think most people just don't know how to do it. That's the problem. Yeah.
Thanks, Claudio. Remco.
Yeah, Claudio mentioned something. He said we have to verify the truth, right, Claudio? We have to be able to do our research. I think that's a concept that is very. It comes from a different era. We're in a different era. I think we do not have that capacity to verify, and we haven't learned to accept that we no longer have that ability. We have to trust. Because we have to trust on the centers of the knowledge, the institutions and the government. The problem is, of course, and this is where the rub comes. The problem is we have seen evidence where the sources of what previously of truth has now been proven to be dubious. I mean, let's take the Volkswagen scandal. I mean, that was here was a respected German company being caught out fiddling with their emission controls to pass US environmental standards. Look at the British parliamentary scandal, where the politicians tried to prevent freedom from action to inquire on their expenses. And a few of their politicians ended up in prison, and a lot of them resigned. I could go on, News of the World. There's another big scandal, Oh, look, I could go on about scandals. The point is, I don't think, contrary to what was said earlier, we no longer have the ability to verify, and we have plenty of evidence and discomfort, and thanks and help by, I have a little bit of a pet concern with Julian Assange in prison. Is a little symbol of what we do to journalists. And that sort of attitude still hangs around from 5 centuries ago, when William Tyndale translated the Bible into from the Vulgate Latin into common English. And what happened? The common man was able to read for themselves the Bible. And what happened? You had a century of turmoil, because the people were suddenly empowered through the Gutenberg press. I should have mentioned that first, perhaps. The Gutenberg press suddenly gave people access to information they didn't previously have. And I think we're going through that same turmoil right now. And I think it will take some time for the dust to settle till we accommodate and establish a new equilibrium. But for a time at least, I think we're going to be struggling with what is truth and what isn't truth. And we will continue to assemble bits and pieces of subsets of truth and create little echo chambers that enables the anti-vaxxers and all the other political agendas that we're hearing. And I say hearing because thankfully I don't live in the United States. It's even worse over there than it is in my country. But I think we're going through a phase where truth is being rattled, and I think what needs to happen is we need to reconstruct and establish our trust in the institutions and in government, and it's going to take some time. And until that happens, I think my feeling is we're going to have some turmoil around truth.
Great, thanks, Remco. And Remco, it sounds like you're saying we need to trust authority, and I hear what you're saying, and I think there's a certain degree of truth to that. But I will say that trusting authority is what allowed the Inquisition to happen, and I don't think we should ever blindly trust authority. We should, use our own judgment and hone our critical thinking skills to speak, to be able to speak up when we disagree with authority, and be willing to challenge authority when we think it's wrong. And only by doing that en masse can we make the right outcome happen when authority misabuses its power, which it does sometimes. And so I think it's good to, ultimately trust ourselves. And that's part of what the Freethinker Institute is about, is helping us all develop our own critical thinking skills so we can discern fact from fiction and reality from what's not real better, as individuals, and then contribute to a more meaningful and positive society as a result. That said, I think authority, often has a better perspective than the disruptor. But as was mentioned earlier, sometimes disruptive ideas are really the right answer, like Galileo. So that said, Natalie, let me go to you. Natalie, you're on mute, by the way.
So what? So the thing that I was saying, seeing how, again, I agree with everybody with the shifts that we're noticing. And that's interesting to me to see this kind of dividing, right? There's some people that think one way, some people think another way. I feel it's just actually, yes, it's something that defines us right now. There's a lot of transformation, a lot of reassessing. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about revolution, which is funny. Sometimes we talked about it, but I think there is this kind of a intellectual revolution when we're going through different. We're debating reality, the concept of reality. We're debating the concept of narrative story. Some people say, well, that's what I choose to believe. I choose to believe this. Some people don't even want to argue with you. They're like, that's what it is. And you're like, but that's not true. And they're like, I don't care. So we see a lot of things happening. I don't think it's because we have too much information. I think it must be telling another story. What's happening? I think we're in a millennium transformation. It has happened before. I'm a specialist of 19th century literature, and things were happening fast, and people were like, whoa, 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 whoa. It was just a lot of crisis. So I think that's what I see right now. I posted this article also with the fact that a lot of the conspiracy theories are actually like QAnon are actually deep-rooted in folklore and, superstitions or things or beliefs. It's not something we haven't seen before. I think it's just a test of time. This is what we're going through right now. There's a lot at stake. There's a lot of rebellion. There's a lot of conflict. There's a lot of opposition. There's a lot of disbelief. I think that's what we're going through.
Yeah, I agree, Natalie. And I think confirmation bias has been brought up a couple of times. That's a psychological term for just believing what we already believe is true to be true. And I think that's, the enemy of truth is confirmation bias, because as soon as we succumb to confirmation bias, we stop learning new truths because we only believe what we currently believe. And that's, really not a good place to be. We want to be always having an open mind to new truths, which is why that's part of the second intention of the Freethinker Institute, is to always have an open mind to new truths that can teach us something new about the world. So I think it's important to actively combat our confirmation bias and know that we all have a psychological tendency to want to think that our current beliefs are right, and just be vigilant about, and open-minded towards new truths that'll teach us new things. Mike, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. We've heard a lot of things that are clearly truth, and I've learned a lot from listening to everybody, from you, from Remco, from Jeff, and I can't list all the names, but there's some smart people here. I'll throw out a concept that might tie all this together. At least it ties it together in my mind. We're used to thinking of truth as a scalar. That truth is not just a scalar, it's a binary scalar. Everything is either true or false, 1 or 0. And we're learning in our multidimensional universe here, our multidimensional political universe, our multidimensional economic universe, that truth is much more complicated than that. And we're condemned to live in Plato's cave, whether we like it or not, because truth is not even a vector with many, many values. Truth is not even a Bayesian matrix with with all that it implies. One of you guys talked about dark matter. One of the people talked about dark matter. We can be in a galaxy passing through the planet Earth, passing through the hot sun of another galaxy, and we won't even know about it. Everything is a set of heuristic models that work. We know they're wrong, but they are, and even though they're wrong, they're useful. So they're particularly useful when you want to balance your checkbook at the end of the month. You can ignore quantum effects generally in that thing. So taking that to another level, Schrodinger's cat is not either alive or dead. He's both alive and dead. And if you extend that to a quantum computer, and you have the qubit, you have a 48-bit qubit word with everything being every possible value, you have a lot of possibilities through that that come back. Facebook recently changed its name from Facebook.com on the stock market to Meta, and what that implies, we're living in a metaverse now, not in a universe, and everything has to evolve to match that. And everything is better than it was before, but we still have complexities. I think less people are being killed in World War III in Ukraine and Syria than were killed in World War II, for example. And we're less, percentage-wise, less people were killed in World War II than in the Peloponnesian War. So we're getting better. But civilization needs to evolve, and and as we go into artificial general intelligence and start to understand all these meaningless, useful, semi-useful models, things will get even better than they are now. And I think noticing all the books in your library in your background, whether they're the secrets are sitting in that library. So I yield the balance of my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Remco.
Mike, you put it so nicely. I drank in what I have to say is I drank in what you were saying there, and I thought you were spot on. Look, truth is just, to me, just heuristics. They're just little concepts that work for a moment of time. Let's recognize general relativity theory. It's never been proven. The algorithm simply works. Just like Newton's algorithm, you know, the famous M1, M2 over R squared, you know, times G. You know, it's just a little algorithm that works. Most things are just algorithms. And hey, that's so liberating. That is so incredibly liberating if you're prepared to do that and just say, look, it just works for the moment. Look, Mike, I know you've said a lot more than I didn't mean to. I just latched onto your word heuristic. You know what is really missing? What is really missing in society, and that deals with truth, and that's the other word starting with T, and that's trust. What has happened is, you know, there's been a breakdown in trust, and it's spectacular. In America, the trust in government has fallen from about 70% down to about 20%. That's an 80% fall in just 40 years, and the similar trends around the world. The trust in institutions. The reality is that we're becoming a far more transparent society, but, and with a capital B, unfortunately, even those institutions are presiding over, let's call it dark matter. You know, let's take the OECD presiding over tax havens, you know, which I think is about $500 billion worth of tax money avoided, and the OECD presides over its member countries like the Netherlands, like Luxembourg. You know, they're just little. The OECD doesn't want to touch it. So how can we have trust in government? How can we have trust in the institutions? But the reality is things are actually becoming safer. We haven't adjusted to it yet because we are presented, thanks to the internet, with all of these bogeys out there, and we're generalizing, and we're making a narrative, and people are engaging the narrative because the narrative is often simpler, it's often convenient, it provides a nice simple answer where the matter can be far more complex. I think what is needed is and it's happening. I don't think, Garrett, that we need an Inquisition type truth authority. That won't work. I think what is needed is transparency, and it is happening slowly. I think as we slowly accommodate the new order, we're in the same period of time as at the time when the Gutenberg press came out. We're in the same era where William Tyndale translated the Bible. The people just haven't learned to handle it. And you know what happened? You know, there was absolute chaos. It was a time of Martin Luther and all the turmoil in Europe, where, you know, when the power that the church had over society began to be challenged, and they had to translate their whole model. I think that this is what needs to happen in our society. And I'm sorry if I'm probably talking too long there, Garrett. I'm singing along your it's late
just
your
my
time.
bedtime. Sorry, we're getting on to my bedtime.
Look, I have the advantage. It's only 9:30. What is it? 9:30 or something. So I have a little bit of an advantage over you in the morning. That is. Anyhow. Okay, this is good stuff there. Look, as I said, I think what Mike said was pretty resonated with me. Yeah, I could ramble on. I have a bit of a habit of rambling. Sorry, I should discipline myself a bit more. I'll do that.
No worries, Remco. Neville, go ahead.
Sort of following the thinking from Mike to Remco. Remco's favorite word obviously is trust, but for me it's understanding, and there's a relationship there. I mean, if you want to build trust, you've got to then try to understand. And the way I see this is in the German philosophical tradition from Hegel and particularly Wilhelm Dilthey. It's about worldview. That is simply a view of the world that each of us and collectively we have in different cultures. And the problem is that we don't understand often the view of the world that an individual or a collective or a culture is actually speaking, because, we haven't yet, well, for many of us, I'm talking about populations, many in the population have yet to really do the education and the lifelong learning. That is to really engage in an attempt to understand the other. And where this picks up with Mike's comment about the mega universe, really worldviews operate like that. Our view of the world is universalized. We have a view of the world and we universalize it. And this is why, talk of mega universes is very troubling, because what it means is that usually in terms of corporations and the political ethos in government is that they don't look beyond the bubble. They don't look beyond their own universalizing within the worldview. They have trouble. That's what creates the barriers and the resistance to understanding others.
Great, thanks, Neville and Claudio.
Yes, I'm not sure whether things are better or safer today than they used to be in the past. Someone mentioned more people dying in the Peloponnesian War than World War II. Did I hear that correctly? I think roughly 87,000 people died in the Peloponnesian War, and like 50 million died in World War. Then we had Nagasaki and Hiroshima, right? Nuclear bombs. Things are being safer. Someone mentioned that we have nuclear bombs now we didn't have in the past. They can destroy the Earth many times over and over again easily. It's just a matter of time before, I think, giving enough time, these nuclear weapons, which are more powerful than the Hiroshima bombs, they can easily make the human species become extinct, right? Because especially if America, Russia gets involved, or China,
Yeah, we both have enough nukes to destroy the entire Earth, either Russia or America.
Right. Then we got climate change. In the past, we didn't have this problem of climate change, right? So we have other existential threats, like some people believe AI is an existential threat. I don't know whether I agree with that or not. We have the problem of terrorism, both domestic and international. We have a lot of problems these days. A lot of things are getting better, yes. Not the areas, there's both good and bad. But safer, I'm not sure about that. Well, that's all I wanted to say.
Steven Pinker was brought up before. I'm going to recommend a book, Enlightenment Now, that I read a summary of on Blinkist, and it basically talks about how we live in the healthiest, wealthiest, safest world that Earth has ever known. And I thought it was a very good juxtaposition to what the news will tell you. If you watch the news, we live in the worst, scariest, most dangerous world that the world has ever known. But Steven Pinker uses a lot of statistics and points out historical trends rather than just using sensationalism and storytelling, which is what the news does to sell papers and eyeballs. So that said, Natalie, let me let you go now.
Yeah, I wanted to say, as long as it doesn't get too hot. The only thing with global warming, and that's the only thing that frightens me, is that the system that we have is a very, very oiled up one, right? So one thing leads to another, and repercussion on the climate and then at the planet scale can happen really quickly if we don't know that. But as we see, temperature can increase very quickly. And then it's almost, I forget anybody in engineering, I forget what it's called when you have a momentum and it makes it, it's usually with mechanics, you start a momentum and then.
You mean a flywheel?
Yeah, and then the mechanism makes it go faster and faster, right? I'm not sure.
Inertia?
Someone told me the term and I forgot.
Inertia?
Inertia? But that's, as long as, it's true that, we have a longer life expectancy and so forth. But now we're dealing with maybe the fact that we're not going to have, we're not going to have much time on this planet. But what I wanted to go back to is also the fact that, again, there's a chasm between what I think is this, right? Some groups are coming forward, identifying on a very different scales that we do. When we use things, terms like critical thinking, I think when we go back to that, it deals also with a lot outside of certain Eastern thinking, religion, you know, and thinking such as, you know, Buddhism, but we have a lot of information that comes from, in philosophy, from Europe, right? From certain centuries. And so this is where we get a lot of what we think critical thinking, where we're comparing and we're analyzing against the backdrop of that knowledge. And what's happening today is that people decide to go another route. And why? Because I think they want a need before rationality, they want a need to establish identity. And I don't know, it's worth maybe asking people, what do you consider more important, identity or truth? You know? And maybe we're at a time, I remember 20th century was all about, in literature and in art, was all about subjectivity. My reality, right? The moment it leaves me, and even in a dialogue, right? Even if I talk to someone and those people may not understand, right? The meaning is lost because it leaves me, it goes to someone else. I don't remember who was saying this, Adorno, all those structuralists, they used to drive me bananas in school. But that was the big theory, right? That the meaning loses the moment it goes from our mouth to somewhere else. So we've talked about subjectivity, and maybe that's what it is. Maybe we have all those, you know, this subjective need to form a new identity, a group. So you have many different groups, right, forming with their own story, with their own, how can I say, their own sources and resources, their own go-to, right? That's kind of what I see, right? Maybe that's why they don't want to talk. Sometimes they basically maybe say, this is not how I deal with life. You guys deal with your rationality. You represent your group. I represent another group. I mean, I'm just trying to play the devil's advocate in a way and trying to understand where they're coming from. So lately I've been thinking about that. We don't teach philosophy anymore in school. So we don't teach critical thinking anymore. So maybe a lot of people don't have that base to actually maybe analyze information, right? Who has studied, like, when we get information and we're prepared to understand what any article, what it means? Do we have time to research who's the author? Where is the article coming from? Do we remember how to do this in school? Was that really important that we learned that in school and in college? So maybe we don't have those tools. We don't really teach. We don't give, you know, we don't teach that in school. And so this is how people don't get those tools. Or maybe, you know, that's one way to look at it. We don't have that structure in place to second guess what we're seeing. Or maybe it's also that people have a need for, like I said, the identity in a global, you know, world, when people are more like, where am I? I'm not like everyone else. Oh, I'm this, and oh, and you like me because we share things, you know? The groups are more like when people say echo chambers. Maybe it's because people have more than ever a need to maybe feel like they relate to someone else. This is why we end up having all those groups, right? Forming. I'm not sure. I'm just throwing this out there. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Natalie. And I think a number of you have touched on a subject that I've written about, which is about how we're building more powerful weapons and putting them in the hands of more people and not commensurately identifying who is responsible to wield how much power, and how do we teach people to be more responsible to wield more power. And if we keep going down that trend, we end up with someone who wants to end life on Earth having enough power to be able to do it, and that's a very bad situation for those of us that are enjoying our lives. So that said, that's probably a topic for another night, but Remco, let me let you go next.
Yeah, I like what you were saying there, Nathalie. I think the idea of identity and associating yourself with a popular narrative, and in a fit of madness, when I was young, I did, amongst other things, a Bachelor of Economics, and I came away scratching my head. My background is in chemical engineering. Anyway, I did an economics degree, and I ended up scratching my head for many years, and I thought, what the hell is that all about? What the heck is that? And it was all about algorithms and fitting models to human behavior. And then quite recently, in the last decade, I read a book called The Black Swan by Nicholas Taleb. And I thought, he's put his finger on it. He's put his finger on it. He said, economists can weave eloquent narratives. They sound so erudite that they will make predictions well-reasoned. It sort of makes sense. Notice, by the way, when they do make their predictions, they're only just about 1 or 2% either way of the trend. They'll really stick their neck out. They really do that. But he makes the point, and this is where I'm coming to. He said, if you want to know what's happening in the economy, you don't go to an economist. You go to a New York cabbie. Go and ask a New York cabbie. He's got his finger on the pulse. And I think increasingly I'm in that view. And so I think this truth is more about a narrative. And it's about a narrative, a conversation that you're having with people that makes sense. Somebody else, and I'll wind up with that because there's a swirl in my head, and whenever I deal with that, I break down. So let me just conclude with this. Somebody else was talking about discovering the truth. Give up that idea. Give up the idea that you can discover the truth. That's arrogant. I've given it up for a long time ago. Yeah, look, I dig in and try and get to weaknesses in reasonings, as I tried to do with relativity theory and with quantum science and their particular pet interests of mine. But the point is, we are no longer in the time of being able to discover the truth for ourselves. It is now so complex, so diverse, and it needs the contextualizing well beyond our ability. I think what is needed, and this is on my hobby horse, what is needed is greater transparency. And that means a breakdown of a lot of the barriers that are there. WikiLeaks is one example, but at the same time, when scientists write papers, they are so difficult to read, and besides, they're often behind paywalls. You don't even have access to it if you have the ability to discern. They write in such complex ways. Even the government. I wanted to find out something about COVID in the United States, and I went to the agency there. I can't remember. It doesn't matter. The point is, I looked at this. I wanted to find out about the case fatality rate in COVID. Do you know your government agency produced something that was so bloody hard to read? I had to think, and I think, what are you saying? And then I had to, it was written in a way clearly to protect themselves, so they wouldn't be, that wouldn't be sort of contested. But hey, what about writing for the common man? So the common man can relate to it. Produce a little summary up front, make it user-friendly, qualify it by all means. There is a break. We need to greater transparency. Bring it back to the common conversation, like the cabbie in New York. Bring it to a place where the common man can understand, because I think the truth is not there, it's everywhere. And that is where I think we're ultimately we are going towards. We are approaching perhaps the age of enlightenment of 5 centuries ago, but we haven't learned to let go of the old model yet. we have to accept our cognitive sovereignty is no longer available to us anymore. That is a concept of a century ago. It no longer applies. We have to, but we're going to go through a painful transition, and I think we're going to see some chaos before the dust settles. And a good sign of that is to see Julian Assange out of prison.
Thanks, Remco. I'm going to wind down, let Nader go, and then I'm going to do final sort of closing out. So go ahead, Nader.
Thanks, Garrett. First, I want to say I agree mostly with everything everybody said. Really good points. From my perspective, truth is binary. It's true or false. If you have A plus B equals C, sorry, if A plus B equals, sorry, my brain is not working, but basically logic, right? If you look at the facts, if 2 plus 2 equals 4, and anything beyond that I think it's just savagery. I think we humans are still way behind. We think we know the facts, but we have a long way to go. I mean, I think we're better off than we were like 200 years ago. People used to kill each other because somebody thought somebody was witch. I think we're in the right trajectory, but a lot of times people make claims about things that are, you can have theories about things, but unless it's proven through scientific method, it's not the truth. I think we have some ways to go, but I'm optimistic. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Nader. I agree. I'm optimistic as well. And I think it's important that we all, if I can kind of close out, I think it's important that we all, try to seek truth with an open mind and an eye towards being the best version of ourselves, and use our critical thinking skills to determine who is trustworthy and whether their data and logic holds up to your own honed critical thinking skills, which I think we should all try to practice at honing our critical thinking skills. We had a session on that a few weeks ago. And I just want to encourage everyone to continue to try to do that and seek truth and, find our own best version of truth, of the truth, and make the world a better place in doing so. And I think that if everybody, hones their critical thinking skills and gets better at discerning fact from fiction, we'll live in a world where actual truth travels faster than fake truth, which would be a really nice place to be. So yes, Natalie, it is the language of Gödel. And hope everybody has a great night. I want to thank you all for coming, for participating, for the really great conversation. Luella,
we're not leaving, are we? That's it.
So it is 9, so that's kind of my bed.
Oh, that's true. It's 9.
So,
it's 9 at your guys.
Yeah, it's 9
that's
here.
True.
So we usually go for 2 hours, but I appreciate that you want to be here more. What I would encourage you to do is join the online community, and let's stay in touch in Discord and keep the conversation going. And come to next week's session. I don't know what it'll be, but you'll get a survey about different topics of interest. And I'll try to see at some point we'll add the ones that we came up with tonight to other topics for the future. And I just want to thank everyone for participating and for the great conversation and the great topic ideas. Really appreciate everyone's comments, and if anyone has anything else that they want to finish out with, feel free. But thanks everybody for coming.
Well, thank you, Garrett. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Great to see you as always.
Bye.
Thank you, Garrett. Thank you.
Hi, everybody.
Yeah, thanks, Garrett. Thank you. Great conversation there. And some really diverse thoughts.
Yeah, go ahead, Natalie.
For Discord, can we still see each other? Because I'm really done with texting and everything. I'm social extrovert, so I need to talk or see people.
So you can do video chat on Discord. Usually we start with voice, text chat, and then if you're text chatting with someone back and forth, you can say, hey, let's video chat, and then we can video chat. So You can do voice chat, video chat, text chat. It does
Yeah,
everything.
because it's nice. It's nice. You know, I don't know how you guys can just be like,
You know, I'm with you.
I don't know
I
how you
like
guys can
video.
just chat for hours, and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh my God, this is like, it's like back in the 17th century, or like, you know, sending messages by pigeons, you know, it's like, it's before the phone, you know, it's like you don't hear the voice, you don't see the people.
It is.
And then finally that we can see, we were waiting for centuries to see each other. You know, you guys are going back to the words, the written words. And it's
You're
like,
totally
what?
right. And Natalie, I'll be honest, like I do a lot of text chat with people. I think there's a lot more miscommunication with text chat than there is with video chat, because you can get like tone of voice and facial expressions with video chat, and you don't get that with text chat. So there's a lot more miscommunication. So I do think video chat is the way to go whenever people's schedules permit. You know, mine doesn't always. Like sometimes I'm driving, sometimes I'm, you know, multitasking. And so that's when I do, you know, voice chat or text chat. But, you know, I like video chat whenever the schedule permits, which is unfortunately not very often given my rigorous work schedule. But you can do all of them on Discord. So all of them are possible. Yeah.
All right. Well, are you, Garrett? Where were you? Where are you?
I'm just outside New York City. Where are you?
Seattle. Who's in Seattle? Jeff, are you in Seattle?
Anyone else in Seattle? We usually get a big West Coast crowd, but maybe not this week. Usually I think they're
no, because 4 is going to be early. It's going to be early. People are still at work until 4 or 5 or 5 or 6.
Yeah, but we tend to get like, you know, a good number of RSVPs from the West Coast groups. We have a couple of West Coast groups that are that we advertise to. So
because the West Coast party don't stop.
Exactly.
We're just waking up, and you guys are
West Coast people know how to have fun. I lived in California for 7 years. I know, trust me. And they all asked me where I was from because they knew I wasn't from California because I wasn't nearly as much fun as them. So,
But we're quiet in Seattle. We're quiet.
Yeah, one thought I had, Garrett. I think it's great the way that you, you know, did coalesced a topic for today. I think it would help, however, to have at least a week's notice so that we can get our thoughts together. I got to say, I don't know whether the rest of you are like that, but it takes a little while to sort of coalesce my conversation, particularly if somebody's speaking in an interesting way, and then I have to suddenly speak, and my poor old brain is, you know, having to do a realignment. And
we do try to get things out a week in advance. We're a little behind schedule now. Like I was, you know, in December, I had things scheduled out through February, and then I got focused on work and stopped focusing on Freethinker Institute, and so we fell behind. And we're starting to like get more speakers for the next couple of weeks, and so hopefully within the next day or two we'll have next week's session out. And then you know, we'll try to get a little bit more advanced notice. I really want to be at least a couple of weeks planned in advance, but we're not there now, but that's where we're striving to be. And so yeah, that's
you mean by plan in advance, you mean selecting the topic?
Yeah, we usually select the topic in advance. The Socrates Café format was what we did tonight. That's where you choose the topic at the last minute, like the night of, but normally we have a topic in advance.
Okay, yeah, that actually is better. But the reason it's better is because then you can, because whenever we do it off the cuff, it's like it's difficult, and so people pick like the old standbys.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can I ask you quick questions? I need to know for sure because I really like this group and I love it. But so this is, I got in touch with you guys through Meetup. Do I need to go somewhere else also to get,
you will
like,
get,
if you say,
you will all get a an invite to a Google group. I'm starting to like, we get everybody's emails. When you register, you put your email in, and we'll invite you all to a Google group where you'll get invited to a weekly, you know, 7 p.m. calendar invite. So that way you'll have a registration link on your calendar so that you can join more easily without having to subscribe every week. And so we're trying to, like, you know, do that for people's convenience so that it's just easier to be in the loop on when these events are happening. If you don't want to be on the Google group, you can always unsubscribe. When we subscribe you, we'll send you how to unsubscribe directions. So anyone that doesn't want to be on it can easily unsubscribe. But for those that want to be a part of it, it'll just make it more convenient to be participating.
Especially if you say you have some lecturers or you have some speakers.
Yeah, we do different speakers. Like I alternate speaking with a PhD in cognitive science on like we're the two most frequent speakers, and then we have different like guest speakers you know, that come here and there, like that I meet through networking or, you know, through networking organizations that I'm a part of. So if people are interested in speaking, feel free to reach out to me offline. And you know, we're always looking for people that want to talk. So
Yeah, I just want to say again, per Jeff, happy Tuesday.
Yeah, I've been. It's like, oh my god, I almost forgot about this. We need to like talk this up. I mean, who
yeah,
knows?
2022, 222.
I know. NPR talked about it all day.
Oh,
So what is that in numerology? Is that 2, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Title is 12 and 3. I don't know. I'm goofing around a lot of times when I get bored. So I'm like, I have some friends who are like, okay, numerology. Number 3, what is that?
But I don't know. Well, 2 is obviously a pretty big number for humans, 2 hands, 2 legs, and so forth. But yeah, all those 2s. I don't think there's ever going to be that many 2s together because normally, like,
Not while we're alive, I guess. Absolutely not.
I mean, just like recruiting. I mean, I guess in 22, but will February 22nd be a Tuesday then? But that only 1 chance in 7 of that. Of course, you could compute it, but. Anyway, well, this was fun. I ran my own group that was somewhat along these lines, so it's been a while.
Great. Well, if you want to co-advertise, Jeff, reach out to me.
No, I'm not going to run any more meetings, but
what's that?
I'm done with that.
Okay. I just mean like I can invite you as an event organizer to my group if you want to get more people to your events, and you can do the same. You know, we can reciprocate and invite each other to each other's groups if you're interested in that.
Okay, well, thanks for that. But mostly don't know. But I mean, I did like a lot of I did preparation before the meetings, and then afterward I wrote up a lot. I didn't really emphasize it while we were talking because people would feel self-conscious or whatever, but it's just sort of like the research though. There is a book on Socrates Café, I'm sure you're aware, right?
Yeah.
yeah
There is.
Yeah it's about someone's experience running a group for a year or 2 or something. Which is, it was kind of more like, you know, people stand up to the mic, which is a little bit how we did it today. But anyway, just the whole idea, I mean, it's just a wealth of information about like how people interact when they're doing things that are, you know.
Are you associated also with there's something that I've seen this week, it's called the Paris Café. Did you see that?
No, but most cities have some version of that, yeah.
But I'm thinking of international, let me see. Because I like to know that there's people from all over the place. There's also, you know what is interesting? There's also some new groups, some hangouts, international hangouts that have popped up. And I like that. I'm thinking, would that be great? Like if you wake up at midnight or 2 in the morning, and I guess you just look, and then there's like people from around the world talking.
It is.
You see,
well, that is what Discord is like, to be honest. Like you can like
Natalie,
on Discord at 2 in the morning, and someone will be like chatting with you right then. So,
Natalie, you should go. You should Google into on the meetup meetings. Australia. There's what is that group from Australia? They have late meetings with what Richard Pope is one of them.
Richard Pope
Melbourne, a group from Melbourne, right? Melbourne group.
Yeah, but Richard Pope is in Portland, and he's doing everything in Discord now. So you mentioned Discord.
Right, he's on Discord.
I
Yeah,
can't do
that's true.
Discord until I get a different machine. It's very power hungry. But yeah,
But that's I think it's called Hangouts. And there was an international, I think there's one from the West Coast, and a lot of things are international. They start from Vancouver, BC.
I think there's also the Barcelona group. They're also known as Socrates Café. Isn't it also Barcelona?
Oh, something like that. But I've noticed those, and I'm saying those because they're not texts like Discord or text. They're actually just through Zoom or Meetup or things, so you can actually see people. And since we could just be naked from the bottom down, right, or not even show up, but it's like, but I like that because for me, I can't sustain myself anymore through like even texting. I mean, I text with people and they're 5 minutes away from me. And it's like,
there you go.
Oh, I think
the next meeting has to be no pants.
Well, I don't have pants. No, but I can say that at the cafe, but do you have pants? Are you guys dressed?
If you pulled that off, Natalie, I'll be impressed at a cafe. So.
No, but I mean, that's the thing that I think there was a commercial eons ago, like when there was this guy who worked from home. I think it was at the beginning of working on computers or anything, maybe in the early 90s.
Yeah, there was some.
There was a commercial where this guy opened for a pizza delivery and he was naked or he didn't have any. So it's a very old joke, like working on a computer. You don't have to be fully dressed.
Well, the way I heard it first was David Letterman. He would do that all when he didn't have anything else to say. He says, "And I'm not wearing pants," because it's always behind the desk, right? So.
Oh, there was something I wanted to say about
well,
that. Like,
also John Oliver does really funny things of that nature too. Sometimes John Oliver, he's amazing. Yeah.
I think there was something about text I just saw. It was maybe it's a stand-up comedian, and maybe it was through Netflix. Something. Who was that? Someone who just did. And it's just I think it's what's his name? The guy who in Master of None. He just released a short, but anyway, I'm going to post his name. He's a stand-up comedian, Aziz Ansari.
Yeah, that's right.
But he just released a short stand-up. But at one point, he's just like, basically, yeah, it's quick, it's inside there, but he basically just like, texting, it's like, yeah, you're here, I'm not here, you're there, and after 10 minutes, it's just basically right outside the door, right? That's all it took, 10 minutes on text when actually someone is crossing the door. And that's how I feel. I'm like, because I need to be efficient, and texting is just not efficient for me.
Garrett, humor would be a great topic, but also perhaps a format. We could tell all our philosophy in joke form.
I'm so bad with jokes. I'll listen on that one. So I think it's a good idea. I appreciate humor, but I'm not good at it. So with that said, I wanna kind of close things out, if you guys don't mind, just because it's now past my bedtime by a bit. And
are you gonna turn into a pumpkin?
I do. I very much value my sleep, and I wake up very early to take care of my kids in the morning. So if I don't sleep a good night's rest, then I have a miserable day the next day. So I really do need to sleep. But I just want to thank you guys for coming, and it was a true delight and a lot of fun. And I hope to see you guys next week.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye-bye.